Okay, so funny story. I just did this entire live on my personal account, which isn't a big deal. Everybody knows that, we do relationship coaching and all this kind of stuff. But I meant to actually do it here. So we're going to talk cheating. We're going to talk cheating because every time we post a short on this concept, a lot of people misunderstand it, and rightfully so. It's a very complicated subject, and it's difficult to get all the points across in a 30-second or 60-second short video on Instagram. So I thought we'd come live. There's a lot of things that I want to clarify about that last post. And if you'd like, you can check out the full episode. Honestly, the best way to really figure out some of these deeper concepts is to really jump into the podcast and listen to the full episode. In the meantime, though, tell me where you guys are tuning in from. And if you guys have questions on the subject, pop them into the Q&A box below. So there's a little question icon. You guys can post questions in there. But we're going to talk cheating. And one more thing. Before I jump in, we just released a new guide. It's completely free to download. It's called The Secret to Healthy Relationships. You can find the link to it in our bio. I want to get straight into this. I have some topics that I want to cover. So as you guys are getting your questions in, I have some topics just to jump straight into because I want to keep this and save this for you guys to rewatch. All right, we've got New York City in the house. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so check this out. Cheating. Do Dr. Glenn and I condone it? No, it is a terrible behavior, right? When we come on and we say something like, does cheating make you a bad person? No, it does not make you a bad person. It is a bad action, but it does not inherently make you a bad person, just like not cheating doesn't inherently or automatically make you a good person. Now, people listen to that, and I understand that this subject is incredibly touchy because if you've experienced it personally, then you know the traumatic nature of this. And so when we have experienced it personally, just me bringing up the subject can kind of dig up all these past experiences. Your trauma is essentially relived, and I don't mean for that at all. We understand from a clinical setting, we understand the pain that this causes. What we're trying to do is help everybody to take a step back and to look at the behavior and come up with better heuristics. So heuristics are these, they're these shortcuts, these mental shortcuts that we want to kind of use to be able to easily process information. So heuristics are things like, once a cheater, always a cheater. Cheating makes you a bad person. These are heuristics. But from a clinical standpoint, it's not accurate. This is what we're trying to get across, that there can be a number of reasons, a number of underlying pretexts for why a person might do this. It doesn't mean that we condone it. It doesn't mean that the behavior is not incredibly destructive, that it's going to destroy relationships, it's going to destroy families. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that context matters, okay? And we have to take a step back and allow there to be a little bit of nuance when it comes to human behavior. And you might be going, I've been cheated on, and this person was a sexaholic, and they were all these things, and you're telling me that that's a bad person, that I should stay with them? No, that's not what we're saying at all. In fact, if we were to simplify this down, look, in most cases, here's what we would say. In most cases, if we're talking about someone cheating on you, right? When we're looking at a relationship, when we're looking at a client who has a pretty simple relationship with that person, meaning they're not yet married, they're dating, or they maybe are married and they don't have children yet. They don't have a house on the line, they don't have business. It's fairly simple to disconnect. In most cases, we're kind of saying like, look, you're probably going to be better off going and finding someone that values the relationship, that values you the same way that you value this other person. Most of the time, that's going to be the advice that is as given, right? But what about in the situations where someone's been married for 15 years? The relationship was once healthy and beautiful, and now it's not. Now it has devolved, but there's children now in the relationship. There's a home, there's businesses, there's the splitting of assets, and all of these things that would be destroyed in that process. Should they get divorced because one person cheats? Well, I'm hoping that you would take a step back and say, well, in that case, I guess it would depend, right? It would depend on what's happening in the relationship. It would depend on whether this relationship was healthy to begin with. It would depend on, are both these people still committed to the relationship? Is the person that cheated coming to the table and taking ownership of it, or are they continuing the behavior? Because if they're coming to the table and admitting like, I made this massive mistake and I do want to work on this and I have a lot to figure out. And the other person says, yes, we did have something that's once healthy, but I don't know if I can ever trust them again, but I want to work at it. It's worth it to give this some work to see if we can save this for our children. I'm hoping that each of you can understand that that's a nuance that's worth looking at. Because here are the actual, when we look at clinical examples, when we look at case studies, we see a number of reasons for why people cheat. I know that when we talk about this online and we say the words like, does cheating automatically make you a bad person? Everyone jumps to the comments and is like, you have to, bad actions are bad. It makes you bad. But there's more going on. I understand that this is the way that you understand this topic from your perspective, right? But that's not a clinical perspective. For example, what if we gave you one example, a particular case study? A woman who's married to a man who is emotionally abusive, who refuses to get divorced. She doesn't know what to do because she can't get a divorce. And the man says, live your life however you want. I don't care, but we're not getting divorced. Okay? She chooses to have an affair and to live her own life, but within that relationship, because she feels as if she's forced to do so, right? In some cultures, she might actually be forced to do so. Would you still say she's a bad person? I hope your answer would be, well, no, it's not a good thing, but that doesn't necessarily make them bad, right? What about another instance where we have a guy who is in a relationship with this woman who just is completely cold, not affectionate. He's been raising the red flag for years and like, honey, I don't feel like this is working out and I just don't feel connected to you and all these different things, right? He doesn't know how to break it off. He's afraid of asking for a divorce. So he has an affair. Why? It's not because he actually wants to cheat. It's because he knows that if he tells her that he had an affair, she'll break it off. She'll be the one to go through with a divorce because he doesn't know how to ask for it. Would you say he's a bad person? No. We'd say that that's an immature way of going about dealing with that problem, right? We'd say that there's a lot of other things that probably should have happened other than going out and having an affair. But we can't just generalize. We can't just use this one heuristic to put everybody into this basket of being bad. And then we have the examples of like just a narcissistic asshole that cheats repeatedly, that has no regard for somebody. That is a type of case study as well. And in that instance, yes, that's a bad person, right? That's a person that has no regard for other people's emotions. And by the way, if there are questions, post them down in the question box because I'm going to come to them. I want to finish kind of all these little topics that I wanted to get through based on that last video, and then I'm going to go to your guys' questions as well. So post them in the question box so I can address them. So what we're saying is that from a clinical standpoint, I understand that your experiences might be extremely visceral and they're going to be based on one particular instance. And when I bring up the subject, when Dr. Glenn and I talk about this, it brings up a very vivid response. And that's trauma speaking, and we get that. I don't want to be insensitive of that. What we're trying to say is that from a clinical standpoint, there are many underlying pretexts for why this can happen. One of those is that the person's actually a bad person. But there's others where it's not necessarily that they're a bad person. The only pattern, the only heuristic, so if you're looking for something that you can use to kind of judge and to say like, well, what kind of person does this? It's not that they're a bad person. The only one that we have that we can apply across every one of these people, anybody who cheats is somebody that generally doesn't know how to deal with conflict directly. They don't know how to manage issues directly. They tend to take other roads of dealing with things because in a relationship, if you are mature, right? If you get to the place where you're thinking of having an affair, where you're just no longer connected, interested in this person, the mature thing would be to either discuss it. If this other person just is not interested, has, they're checked out, they're kind of done with it too, then you separate. If they are interested, then you work on it. But you don't go and have an affair. That's like the roundabout way of like, you're trying to fix a problem by creating another problem essentially, and it's not a good solution whatsoever. So That's what we want everybody to understand from this side. And again, if anyone's asking questions, just post them in the question box, okay? So let's go to one of the other arguments that was made. One of the other things that was said was when we said cheating doesn't make you automatically a bad person, just like not cheating doesn't automatically make you good. There's a couple things here. One, I think everybody's missing the point that we're trying to make. Two, several people said that's a stupid argument. That's a logical fallacy. It's like saying, killing doesn't automatically make you a bad person. It's just a bad action. No, those are not the same at all. And I'm going to tell you why. Killing somebody is not only permanent, it is completely illegal. Okay? So it is immoral, it is illegal, it checks every box. This is the worst possible thing you can do, and it's permanent. Cheating is not illegal, it's immoral. At least in most places, it's not illegal, right? It's immoral, it's unethical, but it's also not permanent in the sense of like someone could cheat. Maybe they destroy a particular relationship, maybe they don't, but they can also change from that, right? So someone can actually make this mistake and change and become, a better person. So first, they are not one and the same thing at all. Second, what we're saying when we say cheating doesn't automatically make you a bad person, just like not cheating doesn't automatically make you good, that's not to say if you're in a relationship with someone that cheats on you, you should think of them as not a bad person, right? If they destroy the trust in your relationship, again, I go back to, in most instances, if you're not married, or if you are married and you don't have a lot on the line and someone cheats, you really have to look at, are we both committed to this, or am I better off finding someone that values the relationship the same way that I do? And in most instances, you're better off finding someone that values the relationship and has similar core values as to you, right? So that's the first thing. But what we're saying when we say this analogy is to not assume, so someone, not the relationship that you're in, assume that you're dating someone who admits to having an affair 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We don't want you to automatically say that that is a bad person. It's not about the relationship you're in right now. Does that make sense? It's not about what you're experiencing right now. It's about looking at saying, I'm dating again, I'm back and meeting people, and someone admits to cheating 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And you think, well, once a cheater, always a cheater. That's not true, okay? And what we're saying is, there needs to be room left for someone to change, to grow, for a little bit of nuance in the conversation, because that person can change and grow. They could also stay the same. They could also make the same mistakes repeatedly, right? But the other side of this is this. By making the heuristic that if someone cheats, they're automatically a bad person, it takes your eye off the ball. Because what we're saying is, just because someone doesn't cheat doesn't mean that they're a good person. Doesn't mean that they're faithful. And everybody's missing this. Just because someone doesn't cheat doesn't mean that they're faithful. That's the piece that we want everybody to open their eyes to. Because someone could not have an affair with you, but they could be texting and leaving themselves open to flirt with other people, have inappropriate boundaries. And guess what? They might not, maybe they never cheated, but they're a type of person that if they did have the opportunity, they most certainly would. Just because someone doesn't cheat doesn't mean that you should take the eye off the ball and say that this person is a good person. What we're saying is, if someone has made a mistake in the past, you shouldn't automatically judge them and say that they're still that same person. Once a cheater, always a cheater is not a good heuristic. And at the same time, we're saying, just because someone doesn't cheat doesn't mean that you should assume that they won't. It means you should be looking to what that person is doing in the relationship. If they are leaving themselves open from a boundary standpoint, having inappropriate conversations with other people, texting other women, other men, that is a person that will likely cheat if they get the opportunity to do so. But you've lulled yourself into a false sense of security because you think, well, since they've never cheated, they probably won't, right? Because we're focused on the person that's done it before. This is what we're getting at. So when you're dating somebody, how do you know? Or let's say you're in a relationship, how do you know whether they're going to do it again, right? Well, what we'd be looking at is ownership, true ownership. See, when you're dating somebody, you want to pay attention to how they would describe past relationships. If they're open about the fact, like maybe, you know, and I'm not saying like at the beginning of dating, but maybe like a month in, they're like, you know, I gotta say, and I don't want you to find out this any other way, but 5 years ago, I made a huge mistake in one of my relationships. I cheated, and this is why I did that. And it was completely wrong, and I know that now, and I see what I should have done, and I can never go back and repair that relationship, but I want you to understand that this is something that I would never let happen again. And if ever our relationship was going that direction, I want you to know that I would be working on our relationship. And if it didn't work out and you said that this isn't what you want, that's fine, but that's not something I'd ever do again. When you hear somebody speaking about past experiences with ownership, then you can kind of understand that they're likely not going to do this again, right? If they can own the behavior, if they can recognize what they did, if they can see it and they can talk about it in this way, it's usually a good sign that they've changed. But if they talk about those past experiences like this, if they say things like, yeah, let's say, for example, that you're dating this person and maybe one of their exes actually told you on Instagram, they DM'd you or they called you or whatever it was, and they said, hey, just so you know, this person cheated on me. And you confront them and you say, I just found out that you cheated on your ex. And they go, yeah, but babe, I'd never do that to you. And you go, well, why did you do it to them? And they go, it was a really bad relationship, and like honestly, like it was in such a bad place, anybody in my position would have done that. She was super toxic and all these kind of things. When a person is taking a horrific, terrible action and placing that ownership on somebody else, they're likely going to do it again. Why? Because if they can take something bad that they've done and they can justify it based on someone else's behavior, most certainly in the future they can do the exact same thing again. Meaning when your relationship with them is starting to go south, when it's not as close anymore, not as romantic and passionate, instead of working on it, they can say, you know, I did this because our relationship kind of sucks. Like it's not as close as we used to be. And so it's kind of like duh, of course I'm going to go cheat. It's kind of on you, you know? If someone denies ownership, they're going to do it again. They're going to justify it again. So that's what we need to look at. You all want heuristics, and I get that. We all want heuristics to be able to make quick and effective judgments, right? The judgment, when looking at someone who has cheated in their past, it's not whether they've cheated in their past. The judgment is whether they've taken ownership of it. That's what you're looking for. And that's what we're trying to get at. It has nothing to do with if you were in this situation and someone has cheated on you. Again, we go back to where are you at in this relationship? Okay, we need to look at an individual basis, and that's where we're going to give the advice from. Now I'm going to start taking your guys' questions because there's quite a few that have come through. Hopefully this answers everything that kind of was brought up in that video. So let's go to PPE 1050. How does one deal with the triggers and pain from being cheated on? So this is a really great question. When we're talking about, you know, going through this experience, someone cheating on you, this creates trauma based around, well, someone breaking your trust based around these things. And you're going to feel going into another relationship that it's going to happen again. And because of that, you're going to stay more guarded, right? The trauma, the triggers, all of those things from that past relationship, those we would say are your responsibility. We would say that you can't take, because what we often do is we go into a new relationship and we say to that next person, we say, you know, I was cheated on, so I expect you to make me feel secure. I expect you to do certain things to make me feel like I can trust you. But that's not right, because we're punishing someone else for someone in our past's behavior, right? And we're also taking that trauma and we're kind of putting it on them. Instead of dealing with it and resolving it ourselves, we're actually putting it on that person, which means that if we push away this person and eventually they leave, we're going to do it to the next person. So the solution in this is to actually look inward. And the way that we usually get there is we look at what was the underlying context for why this happens and what was the situation in that relationship, right? And what we're looking to identify is, why did you choose a relationship with someone that would potentially cheat on you? See, none of us go into a relationship thinking that someone will cheat on us, but there are signs, there are indicators of someone's likelihood to take ownership over their behavior, right? There's certain things that let us know early on, but we typically ignore those things because we want to think the best of them. It feels too good to think otherwise, and we continue. So what we do is we look at, why did I choose that relationship to begin with? And then we start addressing, how can I choose better relationships going forward? When we can take that trauma and resolve it and make sure that you're choosing healthier relationships, then you're not so sensitive to it in future ones. Okay? Let's see. Okay, so getting back with someone after they cheated on you with the person you had a doubt. Okay. Honestly, this one again, we would go back to, if we're talking about a marriage, 15 years, once healthy, children, business, all of this collateral damage that would occur in a divorce, then we'd say it's worth looking at this to see, are both people still in this? Can we get back to a state of being healthy? But if we're talking about you're young, you're dating, you're early in your marriage and someone cheats on you, most cases we would say it is a horrible idea getting back together with that person unless a substantial amount of time has passed and that person has very much changed and you can see that change in them. Otherwise, this is setting yourself up for that happening again. I'm going to say that also, everything that in the answers that I'm giving you guys, I always like to just preface this with, this isn't, therapy, this is not advice, this is data and information based on our case studies. Please take and use this in a way that's appropriate to each of you. Okay, in some cultures, texting is considered cheating, right? What would you say to that? So look, this goes back to that what we were saying is like, just because someone cheats doesn't make them inherently bad, and what we're talking about is not people that do this to you, but people who have done it in their past. And for people that don't cheat, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be faithful. And what we'd say is look for examples of micro-cheating. If someone keeps boundaries low and they're just like, I'm going to flirt with this person, I'm going to text this person, I'm going to have deep conversations about my relationship with so-and-so, that is an emotional affair. And it's the first step that leads to cheating, right? It's like the last step that leads to cheating. So we wouldn't say that texting, we would say that this is micro-cheating, right? Words matter. Words matter. I know we want to put it all together, but no, words matter. If you text and have inappropriate conversations with somebody, that is an emotional affair, okay? That is what that is. It's not physical cheating, but you're getting really close. And in some cases, emotional affairs are actually more difficult to repair. The end result is identical. There's a loss of trust in the relationship, and it can damage the relationship the exact same way. And oftentimes the emotional connection is so strong that it becomes more difficult to repair that than if someone had a one-time physical affair with somebody. Okay, let's see here. After my breakup, I'm unable to feel intimate with my new partner. How to overcome it? This is a really great question, one that we'd want to understand what's happening. What's happening in the current relationship to make you feel like you're unable to become intimate. If this is dealing with sexual abuse, if it's dealing with deep-seated trauma, we'd say a psychotherapist is needed to kind of work through this type of stuff. If we're thinking that this is more so what's happening in the current relationship, that we need to bring that person into it, right? So we'd look at, is this past trauma that we need to resolve, or is this a current relationship issue that's making you feel unsafe? Fiven says, I'm in a relationship with a guy who is not available. How do I get the confidence to leave? Oh, goodness. Okay. You already know it's not a good relationship, right? The confidence to leave, well, you might not have that confidence for a while, but you don't need confidence to leave. You simply need to understand where this relationship is going. You're in a relationship with someone who's not available, someone that you've already identified that this isn't good. It's going to a bad place. You don't need confidence right now. What you need is the ability to love yourself. Love yourself enough to say, I'm going to deal with the pain of ending this. And then through that process, developing your confidence so that you don't choose someone like that again. See, we often think that we need to develop confidence to leave, when in reality, that confidence, that lack of confidence is actually why you're in that relationship to begin with. Because your lack of confidence puts you in a position where you chose somebody that is unhealthy for you, where you chose to receive some sort of attention, some sort of love, even though it's not the love that you deserve. You're not going to fix that right now. But you can make the decision without that piece, if that makes sense. And then you can work to rebuilding that confidence and being able to choose a better person going forward. Miss Lizzie Pearl, how can a man cheat for 5 years and still say, I never meant to hurt you, I always loved you? How can a person do that? They can do that because they're narcissistic. They can do this because if you imagine, like, empathy for a lot of people comes kind of naturally, right? But for a lot of others, they don't have that empathy. And while they don't want to hurt you, they don't necessarily think even that far ahead, right? They're thinking that this action is they're not thinking really much of anything other than just, if I do this, it'll make me feel good, and I can probably keep this from, damaging other areas of my life, and I'm going to keep this closed off and contained. So it's a very narcissistic viewpoint to say that, I never meant to hurt you, I always loved you. Because if you actually love somebody, you don't do those things to begin with, right? The problem is that their idea of love is skewed. And usually this all goes back to, again, their own childhood trauma, none of which you're responsible for, by the way. A lot of times when someone starts to learn their narcissistic tendencies go back to their trauma, they start to blame it on other people. And it's not on you to resolve that, it's on them. But it's important to understand that if they can't see it, if they say things like, I never meant to hurt you, I always loved you, then they have a very different picture of what love is. They have a very different value set than you do. The thing is that trying to explain someone else's values through your own eyes, or I should say trying to explain their actions through your own set of values, is virtually impossible. You value a relationship, you empathize, you would never do something to hurt someone, right? Trying to explain why they would do that doesn't work. It's actually a complete waste of time because they just don't share the values that you have. But yeah, that is a terrible situation. I'm sorry to hear that. Why a guy you're dating, okay, this is from Julia. Why a guy you're dating talk about himself telling you that he had sex with a lot of girls? What's the meaning of talking about that during getting to know each other? Okay, Julia, this happens a lot. This is one of your best indicators. So somebody who is narcissistic will literally talk through their past exploits as if it's something impressive. As if it's like, this is why you should love me because so many other people. And the thing is that it can often come off as very charming. And usually these people are charismatic, they're good looking, they're all of these things. But what they're actually doing is admitting to you what they're going to do in your relationship and what they're going to continue to do. So when someone is speaking this way, it's a wonderful sign that you're dealing with somebody that is highly narcissistic and that this is a relationship that you just want to completely avoid altogether. But they're basically doing it as a brag, right? They're basically using it as like they're putting it out there and saying, if so many people want me, you should want me too. It's kind of entice you, like, oh, like playing hard to get type thing, whatever it might be, but incredibly unhealthy. This is an interesting one. So can you trust someone? So Thyra BC, can you trust someone that always has to be the good guy in everyone's book? They're not able to close doors and walk away because they don't want to upset them. Well, you can trust that they will always please others. So what you're describing is a people pleaser. You can trust that they're always going to be a people pleaser, which means that if at some point you expect them to value your relationship above others, to say, I'm going to close something else off so I can protect this, that would probably not be a good expectation of them, right? Doesn't mean that necessarily you, like trust to varying degrees. So when you say trust, I think like, well, I could be friends with a person like that because I can trust that they're not going to steal from me or, do something that's going to harm me, but I wouldn't get too close to them. Because if someone is so afraid of hurting other people and making a stand and doing whatever, then I know that we're not really going to connect all that well. I know that if push comes to shove, that person doesn't have my back necessarily. So I'm going to trust with boundaries in place. But what often happens is that people get into relationships with people like this, and they'll begin to recognize that everybody else takes precedent. Everybody else's feelings takes precedent over your own. And that's a really crappy relationship to be in, especially if that person doesn't see it or if they don't want to change. So you can trust that they're going to continue to people please, to continue to put other people's emotions ahead of yours in that relationship. Okay, is holding back your partner from social media cheating? I assume you're kind of like asking, is social media a form of like micro cheating? And that can depend, right? A lot of people use social media for like purely business uses. A lot of them use it from, there's a lot of different reasons to use social media. Now, here's what I would say. If you are a male model, you're dating somebody, and let's say that you post images from your photo shoots, right? You're just posting those images from photo shoots, and any direct message that you get from other women, from other men, depending on whatever your orientation is, any messages that you're getting you keep purely on a professional level, then no, that's not cheating. Even if you're posting things that, like, maybe you did a bikini shoot, maybe you did whatever it might be, that's not cheating. But we would say that it's micro cheating if, like, you're in a committed relationship and you're the same model and you're posting images of yourself, and then you're having deep conversations with other people. You're leaving the windows and the doors open to that relationship. That is micro cheating. So it all depends on the person's purpose in using social media. It all depends on, like if we're looking at a committed woman and she posts for no reason, she's posting images of herself in a bikini, and she really values the attention that she's getting from other guys, and yeah, that's not a good sign at all. That's an indicator of somebody who is 1 foot in and 1 foot out of the relationship. Someone who very likely is going to be open to having an emotional affair and probably taking it down the road to having a full-on affair should the circumstance present itself. So most definitely it depends on the usage. But again, holding someone back from it is also a sign of, like, well, you're not understanding. Like, if you force your partner, you can't use social media, that's not only controlling and manipulative, you're kind of missing the point, right? You should be with somebody that you trust, somebody that you understand what they value, someone that has nothing to hide, someone that shows you things. So if you're in that position, you're like trying to stop someone from doing it, that's a really bad sign to begin with. Okay, I'm gonna take a couple more. This is a great one. Awesome said, I forgave cheating. That naturally a wrong decision. Okay, you're asking, was that naturally a wrong decision at the end? We communicate now so much better. Is it possible to actually work things out that good? So I'm not sure where you're at in the relationship. Again, like, it's there would be no way to say, like, if the decision was right or wrong without understanding the entire pretext of the relationship, like where you were at and what's going on. And if someone comes to the table and is genuinely remorseful, they're taking ownership. If you feel like you're so invested in this relationship, you have children, you have all these different things, it makes sense to work at it. But to work at it with boundaries, to work at it with the understanding that, like, hey, if you do anything along those lines again, I'm done, I'm out. So we work with a lot of couples that have been in this situation, and yes, it's possible to address and to resolve, but it always depends on the situation. And I don't want making the wrong decision in the end, right? I understand that we all have this human need to kind of be right in our decisions, but there's a problem with that, because you don't know whether you're right in that decision until, like, you're dead. I mean, what would make you right? If they stay with you for the rest of your life and they never do it again? Would you be wrong then if you stayed and they cheated again, right? Saying, like, putting ourselves in this position where we have to be right or have to be wrong, it puts a burden on us that it's anxiety filled, it's stress driven, and it's not natural. Like, look, if you want to give the relationship another go, then do it. You're right in wanting to give it another. It doesn't matter what anyone else says. If you want to try it again and you feel like there's something there that can be salvaged, then try it again. If you don't, then don't. Stop. If you feel like this was inherently unhealthy to begin with, that's the place that we would say, make the right decision would be to stop, right? The only time I would say that someone's making the wrong decision is if they're repeatedly making the same decision again that's getting them hurt. So if this person comes to you and says, I'm sorry, and you say, I forgive you, let's work on this, and then they do it again, and they go, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, it's okay, let's do it again. That's when you're making the wrong decision. But I don't believe it's right or wrong when it comes to you have to take each situation for what it is and understand that even if they choose to do it again, you weren't wrong in the decision to try again, but you would be if you gave them another shot. You learn from the decision that you made. If you give them another shot, that's not learning anymore, that's opening yourself up to the same thing over and over again. Okay. I am going to take one last one and then jump off for now. Let's go for... This one's a good one. And I think we can kind of sum up a lot of it. So Yesaluma says, how can you trust a husband who is father of your kids who has been cheating a couple of times? Well, if that father has not come to the table taking ownership and making repair attempts and actually working on the relationship, you don't. You don't trust someone like that cheats repeatedly, that refuses to take ownership. Look, if someone cheats and they say, I just keep making this mistake, that's a problem. You don't trust that person again. You don't set yourself up, even in cases where you have children with that person. The only time that trust can be rebuilt, and this is probably the most important thing that I want everyone to understand and I want to close with, right? There's only one way trust can be rebuilt. That's when the offending action stops, ownership is taken, and that person works to repair what's going on. Then we can work toward the process of forgiveness and trust. But you could even think of this, I don't know if you guys are religious, I don't know what background you have, but even from oftentimes we think of, religion and spiritual context when we think of the subject of forgiveness, right? We think of well, I'm told that I should always forgive. Well, even a biblical context of forgiveness says that forgiveness only comes when someone is repentant, when there is a change of heart. Meaning you don't go out and do something wrong and say, God, please forgive me, and then go and do it again. There is no change of heart, right? You might as well wait until you're done screwing up, until you're done doing that thing, until you say yeah, I've done it enough, I'm ready to change, then go and repent. But a lot of times people are stuck in this situation where a person continuously does something and they talk about how do you repair the trust? And the answer is you don't. You're unable to forgive or repair trust when someone is continuously doing something to break that trust. What you can do is put up a boundary, separate from that person, stop allowing them to hurt you, let them live their lives, and you live yours. If 10 years down the road you decided this person is cheating, my thing paused, but in most cases, you're going to find someone who actually values you. You're going to find someone, if you can learn to love yourself, if you can learn to value yourself, you're going to find someone who feels the same. The people that you allow to stay around you are a direct reflection of what you think about yourself. If you love yourself and you respect the person that you are, you won't tolerate behavior from people that treat you otherwise. So that's kind of where we would go with that. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful to each of you. I hope this helps clarify kind of when it comes to this subject and we post concepts on this, it's difficult to get them right in a short 30-second, 60-second video, but I'm hoping that this kind of expounds on it. I'm going to save this video as well so you guys can refer to it. And also we have a new guide. It's completely free to download. You guys can check out it. The link to it is in our bio. It's called The Secret to Healthy Relationships. It's awesome. We keep getting the question of what are my core values? And it's a difficult question to answer. So Dr. Glenn and I created this 10-page guide. It's free to download. It's going to walk you through exactly our process, what our core values, it's even going to help you get a glimpse of your own values as well. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.